I was up early. Tony's last volunteer, a prematurely purple prepubescent type in road warrior garb, had left at about 3:00 a.m. In spite of the massed mercury vapor lights, I'd been unable to ascertain the gender of this particular specimen. I had the feeling that it didn't much matter to Tony. Tony, I presumed, would be sleeping in. I rummaged in my cooler and selected an onion bagel, some cream cheese, and the last of the smoked salmon for breakfast. I washed it all down with some orange juice, cleaned up my mess, and headed for the shower, careful not to let any part of my body touch an exposed surface. The shower head had only two adjustments. The first provided an incredibly fine spray that was like trying to wash in fog. The other setting could have easily been used for crowd control. It had been set that way the first time I'd used the shower. I'd gotten in, turned the handle up, and immediately been hit right in the groin by a water cannon. It paralyzed me. If I hadn't been able to scoot down by the drain, I'd still be pinned to the back of the tub with a hole in my chest. Thank God I'd been wearing my new slippers. After about 10 minutes of being alternately misted and bludgeoned, I squooshed back into the room, got out some fresh clothes, and stood up on the bed to get dressed. While I was lacing up my Reeboks, I wondered what Tony dreamed about at night, deciding that I probably didn't want to know. I was putting my slippers on the windowsill heat register to dry when I noticed that Tony was about to have his first visitor of the day. This was a bit of a disappointment. I'd figured he would be running out of gas by now. Obviously, the man had unimagined reserves of strength. I wondered if maybe he'd been going to the health club in preparation for his yearly sojourn, which in turn led me to wondering exactly what would constitute a workout for a sport like Tony's. How many sets of what? I quickly wrote this off as something else I didn't want to know. This morning's repast was pretty much standard fare. About 5'7", skinny, long blonde hair grown out brown at the roots, wearing jeans, a green flowered blouse, earrings the size of hubcaps, and red shoes with impossibly high heels. She knocked and was instantly admitted. Obviously, Tony had been up and expecting her. All was as well as it was going to be until I managed to get out of this virus culture of a motel. I settled into the tape-patched coral naga-hide chair by the window and got out my book. Nobody but John McPhee could keep me reading about oranges for 200 pages. I was immersed in citric splendor when a sudden movement in my peripheral vision jerked my attention from the Indian River country of Central Florida to the door of Tony's room. I was greeted by a scene that presented limited possibilities. Either Tony was broadening his area of interest to include large black men, a notion that, while unspeakable, was not beyond the realm of possibility, or we were about to have a serious problem. As I grabbed the jacket that held my 9mm from its hanger, I got my answer. The larger of the two, using the balcony rail for leverage, reared back, cocked his leg, and planted one of his 14 triple E's right in the middle of the door. I had just begun my sprint around the third-floor balcony when the door splintered and both men disappeared inside. I was ready for trouble. I wasn't ready, however, for the scene that greeted me as I burst through the door. The smaller of the two was madly snapping pictures, while the door kicker was holding down the center of the room. The room smelled like a stable and looked like a back room at Central Casting. Costumes of all types were scattered about the room. A pink leotard and tutu size 52 stout, a sawed-off canoe paddle with a taped grip, a World War I leather helmet complete with goggles, a yellow plastic miner's hat, a pair of white woolly chaps with matching vest, swim fins. Swim fins? Jesus! Whatever his myriad failings, the man led a rich fantasy life. You had to give him that. Tony was backed up against the far wall wearing his famous Viking costume, sans the breeches, trying valiantly to cover his distended organ with his hands. This type of intrusion would have deflated me in a hurry, but not old Tony. I made it a point not to look at him. The girl was lying face down on the